Max Verstappen's sensational Formula 1 season continued on Sunday in Austin, but just how close did Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes get to their first win of the season? From the Circuit of the Americas, welcome to Paddock Packdown. So it was another great day for Red Bull and Max Verstappen here in Austin. Max's 13th win of the season as Red Bull clinched the Constructors' title for the first time since 2013. Now, Max looked like he was going to get a very easy victory. He was pretty comfortable out in the front throughout the first two stints of the race, but then a dud pit stop turned the tables completely. Red Bull had a wheel gun failure as it tried to fit the right front tyre to Verstappen's car, and that meant his pit stop, instead of taking the usual 2 seconds, took 11 seconds. That turned the race on its head, and it put Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes very much in the pound seat to score their first win of the season here in Austin. But even as Hamilton counted down the laps and got so close to that first win of the year, Verstappen was able to recover and fight his way through to take the win away and give Red Bull another win to celebrate. Now, as we've talked about many times on Paddock Packdown throughout this year, Mercedes have been trying to work out just what the issues are with its W13 car. It's made steps forward throughout the year, but this really does feel like the closest it's got all season to scoring that first win. Could Mercedes have won the United States Grand Prix had things gone a little bit differently? The simple fact of the matter is that Red Bull did have the quickest car here in Austin, but that doesn't mean Mercedes wasn't in with a slight shout of winning the race. The team has clearly made some big steps forward with its W13 car across the course of the season, and we saw its final update package of the year arrive here in Austin this weekend, including a new floor and some rear wing end plate updates. That played a big role in helping Hamilton stay within range of Verstappen throughout the race. The gap at points was only around 5 seconds at the max under the first stint, and then even in the second stint, Hamilton was only a couple of seconds behind, helped by the safety car, of course, that did bring him a little more into contention. And that all meant, with Verstappen's slow stop, Hamilton had a real chance of winning this race. He was 6 seconds clear of Verstappen after the Red Bull came out of the pits, and it was a gap that even gave Toto Wolff, the Mercedes team boss, we spoke to him after the race, and he said at that point he really thought it was feasible that Hamilton could win the race. Lewis himself said there was a second where he did think, I've got a chance of winning this, but then things quickly moved away from Mercedes. Now, if Mercedes was going to win this race, it needed a little help from its fierce rival of former years, Ferrari. Charles Leclerc had driven a brilliant recovery drive to go from 12th place on the grid to actually be ahead of Verstappen as they came out of the pits together. They both stopped on the same lap, and with Max's slow stop, it meant that Leclerc actually came out of the pits in front of his former rival for this year's championship before Max went and won it. Now, we've seen Leclerc and Verstappen go wheel to wheel on a number of occasions this season. And if Hamilton was going to win this race for Mercedes, he really needed Leclerc to do a lot more and really make his Ferrari as wide as possible to try and hold Verstappen back. Ultimately, though, that Red Bull is just too fast, particularly in a straight line. We saw that at Spa, where that Red Bull was so dominant. And here, as they went down the back straight, there was little Leclerc could do to try and hold Verstappen back. That didn't stop him, though. We saw Verstappen go for a great lunge into turn 1, and then Leclerc was able to get him back on the undercut as they went down the hill to turn 2. But a few corners later, at turn 12, as they went down that back straight, it was just too much. Verstappen flew past Leclerc, was up into second place, had cut the gap to Hamilton to 4.6 seconds, and looks well on his way to winning the race. Now, Hamilton and Verstappen had quite similar tyre lives left at the end. They'd only pitted within a lap of each other, but the big difference was the type of tyre that they were using. Mercedes had gone into the race with one fewer set of medium tyres than Red Bull had, and that meant that Mercedes, for the two-stop that pretty much every team did here in Austin, they were always going to have to go medium, hard. Red Bull, on the other hand, had the other set of mediums, a quicker tyre, less durable than the hard, but for the distance they had left in the race, it was easily going to be enough to get Verstappen home. The gap didn't exactly fall dramatically to begin with. Verstappen was making sort of quiet inroads, but then as the stint wore on, the gaps got bigger and bigger. It was half a second that was pulling Hamilton in, and by the time Verstappen got DRS, it was quite inevitable what was going to happen. That didn't stop Hamilton from putting up a fight, of course. He really tried his best to try and keep Verstappen back. He was reporting over the radio once the move was complete about track limits as well. Both Verstappen and Hamilton had that black and white flag that meant any more sanctions at the end of the race would have resulted in a time penalty, but Hamilton just didn't have enough to keep Verstappen back. The straight line speed of the Mercedes, it's been something they've talked about right the way through this season. The sort of draggy problem on the W13 car, something they really want to fix for next year. And that meant Verstappen, again, with that straight line speed, could just easily pass Hamilton down straight into turn 12 and get the move done for the lead of the race. Hamilton fought as hard as he could. He held on within a second for a number of laps afterwards, but as the laps ticked down, Verstappen was able to just edge his way clear and eventually cross the line for his 13th win of the season. So those were the two factors that meant even with Verstappen's slow stop, Mercedes still couldn't win the race today. They had the wrong tyres left at the end, and Leclerc simply couldn't hold Verstappen up long enough to ensure that Hamilton had a big enough gap to get the win for Mercedes. Nevertheless, there's lots of reasons for Mercedes to be hopeful as they try to end that win drought for this season. Lewis Hamilton said after the race he thought Austin was probably going to be Mercedes' best chance of winning again this year. That has now passed by. We've got Mexico, Brazil and Abu Dhabi still to come. But Mercedes, we know that update on the car this weekend has worked. The floor, the end plates on the rear wing, it's definitely provided a step forward as they understand this W13 package. And also there's a new front wing to come as well. We saw some pictures of it on Thursday. We understand that some changes are required from the FIA after discussions to make it work and legal for the Mexican Grand Prix. But that's an ongoing talk between Mercedes and the FIA. We'll wait and see if that does turn up there. But again, that would be another step forward for Mercedes. But even if it doesn't get another win this season, Mercedes knows that it's on the right track. Toto Wolff said that if you're on an upward trajectory, it's like stocks and shares. There's always going to be ups and downs, and I think he's very much expecting that to continue through the final 3 races of the season. But ultimately, it was Max Verstappen's day, and for Red Bull, a great way to clinch their 5th F1 Constructors' Championship, their first since 2013, and a very apt result as well after on Saturday evening we learned the sad news that Red Bull founder Dietrich Mateschitz had passed away at the age of 78 following a long illness. Our thoughts are very much with Dietrich's family, his friends and the whole Red Bull organisation at this time. They'll be celebrating the Constructors' Championship win tonight with heavy hearts but immense pride about what they have achieved this season. As for Paddock Packdown, we'll be back next week with the Mexican Grand Prix at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez in Mexico City.